handful of explorers stood at the mouth of a cave locals swore was cursed. Their lamps threw trembling halos of light against the rock that hadn't seen daylight in tens of thousands of years. What they found inside would ignite one of the strangest mysteries in archaeology. A story of ancient disks, vanished evidence, and the suspicion that humanity's past might be far older, far stranger than we dare to believe. It began quietly, without fanfare, without the world watching. A small team in the early 20th century set out to map remote mountain valleys in northern China. No grand expedition banners, no headlines, just notebooks, hand-drawn maps, and stubborn curiosity. The terrain punished them, sheer cliffs, knife-cold wind, peaks wrapped in clouds like ancient guardians. But whispers persisted in nearby villages, rumors of hidden caves containing strange markings and bones not quite human. When they found the entrance, it was nearly invisible. A crack in the stone, narrow enough to miss unless you were looking for secrets. Inside, the air swarmed slightly, thick with the smell of ancient dust. Lanterns flickered, shadows stretched, and then the chamber. Skeletons lay in careful rows, dozens, small bodies 4 feet tall at most, their skulls larger than expected, eye sockets rounded and deep. Not children, not known tribes, something else. And beside them, discs. Thin stone discs, round and perfect, each with a central hole. At first glance, they resemble primitive records, though the technology they suggested was thousands of years too early. Spiral etchings ran across their face, fine, with impossibly precise grooves. The team worked in stunned silence. No one spoke loudly. Instinctively, they sensed the weight of the place. They collected bones and discs, sketched the chamber, packed artifacts in crates, and left before their lantern oil ran out. Some places feel like they're holding their breath. Back in the capital, the crates were labeled and shelved. Reports were filed, then ignored. The world marched toward greater and louder crises. Wars loom larger in memory than discoveries made in silence. Years passed, knowledge slept, until someone, decades later, bothered to open one of those crates again. Inside, the discs waited, smooth, cold, silent, waiting for light to touch them again, waiting to speak. That is where the story truly begins. The world hardly noticed when the crates returned from the mountains. There were no newspaper headlines, no grand academic announcements. The expedition members logged their findings, stored their notes, and quietly moved on to safer, more conventional studies. In a world preparing for global conflict, caves and strange stones were not a priority. Time passed, governments changed, files were misplaced. History, if ignored long enough, begins to disappear. It wasn't until after the war, in a calmer era, when the scholars once again had the luxury to chase mysteries, that someone rediscovered the crates. A young professor, humble and curious, with more patience than prestige, was the first to pry one open again. He expected pottery shards, broken tools, maybe some fragments of bone. But instead, he lifted a thin, round slab of stone, smooth, almost polished, and heavy for its size. A disc, 9 inches across, a clean hole through the center, grooves spiraling outward in perfect precision. He ran his thumb along the etched lines and paused. The surface didn't feel carved, it felt cut, as if a tool of immense control had sliced into the stone with a steadiness no early culture could manage. He placed the disc under lamplight. The grooves glimmered, catching light in a way that suggested metal mixed with mineral. The professor noted the shape, the texture, the engineering. He weighted it in his palm, heavier than granite, as if infused with metal or something denser, deliberately designed. And then, without warning, he thought he felt it tremble. Not shake, but resonate. A faint vibration as if the stone held a hidden heartbeat. He set it down quickly, startled by his own reaction. Later he would test it again. Sometimes he felt it, sometimes not. Curiosity is a door that once opened, rarely closes quietly. He returned to the cave site records. They had come from a remote valley, buried deep within the mountains. Beside the discs, the expedition found rows of small skeletons, no taller than 4 feet, skulls slightly enlarged, with delicate bones and unusual cranial shapes. Arranged intentionally, buried, not scattered. He reread the old notes written in careful, puzzled hand. Not children, not animals, unknown. The professor visited the storage facility where the bones had been kept, or should have been. The catalog numbers existed in faded ink, but the shelves where they belonged sat empty. Displaced during reorganization was the only explanation offered. When? By whom? To where? No one knew. He returned to the crate of discs. There were dozens of them, some cracked, some pristine. Each one bore grooves so fine they required magnification to study. He selected one and brought it to his small, underfunded lab. Under the microscope, the grooves revealed themselves not as scratches, but microscopic channels, uniform, precise, and deliberate, more machine than hand. He studied day and night, no grant, no assistant, no spotlight. His colleagues humored him at first, a harmless curiosity, until the results grew stranger. One evening, he fashioned a crude test, not scientific, just instinct. He placed the disc on a phonogram turntable, not expecting anything, simply driven by a hunch. The stylus touched stone, and the record spun. A low pulse thudded through the air, not sound, but vibration. Lamp glass hummed, paper trembled on the desk. He swallowed hard and leaned closer. It was as if the stone was remembering. He turned off the machine quickly, breath shaky. He wrote, "This is not a simple artifact." The next weeks blurred. He cataloged patterns, photographed grooves, and traced every spiral like the orbit of a forgotten planet. Slowly, the feeling grew unsettling, impossible to ignore. That the discs weren't just relics, they were records. Records of something ancient, something lost, something waiting for an answer. And so the scholar wrote for the first line of what would become one of archaeology's most whispered mysteries. Not primitive, engineered. He had no idea that sentence would mark the beginning of the end of his career, and the beginning of a story the world was never meant to know. The professor devoted himself to the discs with a quiet obsession, the kind that begins as curiosity and slowly becomes duty. The more he studied, the more he sensed something immense hidden in the spirals, like a voice trapped beneath miles of stone. He began by mapping the grooves by hand. Hours stretched into nights, weeks blurred into seasons. He filled notebooks with sketches, mathematical ratios, spacing analysts. Most ancient writing is block-based, characters, symbols, strokes. But these grooves flowed continuously, endless, spiraling, unbroken. Language built not in lines, but in motion. He measured distances between grooves. Patterns emerged, repeating intervals, structured clusters. Language follows emotion and concept. Data followed structure and logic. The discs followed logic. One evening, he laid tracing paper over a disc and slowly rotated it as he marked each groove. The pattern resembled a waveform, vibrating across space. A recording, perhaps not of sound as we understand it, but of frequency, vibration, resonance. What if the discs were not written to be read, but played? He borrowed an oscilloscope from a physics department colleague under the pretense of testing mineral density reactions to vibration. In truth, he wanted to see if the grooves held frequency data. The results were unsettling. The stylus touched the disc. A low hum filled the room, subtle but present, like the breath of the earth. A pulsing rhythm followed, almost like a heartbeat, not mechanical, organic. The lights flickered, his chest tightened. He felt watched. He stopped the test abruptly. His hands trembled as he wrote, "They are not silent." The next stage came not from machines but language. He studied the markings under magnification again, deeper this time. Beneath the obvious spirals, he noticed micro notches, tiny incisions, repeating every 716 grooves. A cycle, a marker, a reset point. Writing rarely cycles like this. Programs do. He converted spacing ratios into tonal values, primitive but effective. When he assigned pitches, patterns formed, not random, but structured, rhythmic, purposeful. He nearly dropped his pencil when he realized what he was looking at. Encoded information. He began transcribing. Days became nights. Ink faded from pages under the pressure of his hand. Then came the first deciphered fragment, shaky, incomplete, but unmistakable. We descend from the sky. He froze and read it again, checked his math and checked again. Another fragment emerged. Our vessel broke apart. Then another. We could not return. His breath caught in his throat. He pushed forward, translating more. The people feared our light. We lived among them in sorrow. We buried our dead beneath the mountain. He set his notes down slowly, heart pounding. The room felt suddenly colder, the world suddenly larger and lonelier. He confided in one colleague, cautiously trembling with equal parts excitement and dread. The colleague laughed at first, then, upon seeing the notes, grew pale. "Do you understand what this implies?" they whispered. The professor nodded. The colleagues shook their heads slowly. "You must stop. If you publish this, it will destroy you." He didn't listen. Some truths are too heavy to bury once held. When he presented his findings to the faculty review board, the room turned to ice. Not anger, but fear. The kind of fear that comes when tradition feels reality sliding out from under it. They dismissed him, accused him of fantasy, denied further study, but this wasn't enough. They confiscated his notes, revoked his storage access, removed the disk from his possession under the guise of preservation review. He protested loudly until security escorted him out. That night he wrote one final sentence in the margins of his last surviving notebook. "The disks speak when light touches them." 2 days later, he resigned. Within a year, he vanished from academic memory. His notes were scattered, stolen, hidden, pieces of a truth someone feared. And the disks, gone, removed, erased from catalogs and institutions like they had never existed. Except they had, and someone knew. The future would prove that the more the world tried to bury the Dropa Stones, the louder their silence became. As the decades rolled on, the Dropa Stone story refused to die. Not through universities, not through museums, not through official history, but in late-night discussions, obscure journals, whispered conferences, and in the minds of those who sense that truth sometimes survives only in shadow. The more the world modernized, the stranger the legend grew. Engineers, physicists, and fringe researchers began examining secondhand sketches, smuggled rubbings, and faint photographs said to show the discs. They didn't see myth, they saw technology, something resembling phonographic encoding, data storage, or frequency architecture. One Czech engineer studied rumored copies said to have been rescued before vanishing into private hands. He described the discs as quartz-based composite stone, infused with trace metals, formed under intense heat or energy, not carved, fused. Natural stone doesn't align itself in micro-layered spirals. Primitive tools do not create grooves with sub-millimeter precision. Yet these discs, if genuine, defied geology, archeology, and physics. He performed frequency tests. When exposed to certain tones, the disc reportedly vibrated, emitting micropulses that interfered with nearby instruments. Lamp meters flickered, needle gauges twitched. One technician claimed his wristwatch began ticking backwards. though skeptics say stress can distort memory. The engineer called these stones fossilized information. Then he abruptly stopped publishing. His colleagues said he lost interest. His neighbors said the government visitors came first. A Soviet technical report, photocopied and circulated through the Cold War, claimed that 2 discs obtained for study produced ultra-low frequency pulses, localized magnetic disturbances, cognitive anomalies in test subjects. One scientist allegedly wrote in the margin, "Not recording device, thought container." Thought, memory, echoes of minds long dead, stored like whispers in a crystal. Was it true? Hard to say. The paper disappeared shortly after. But rumors persisted that a military research unit briefly studied the phenomenon before sealing the files. Not disproved, just disappeared. Debate fractured into 2 dominant theories. Theory 1, visitors from the stars. Beings crashed, landed millennia ago, unable to return home, left behind a record of their fate, buried their dead with honor, passed into myth as sky people or star visitors. Oral legends in the region speak of small pale ones who came from the clouds and whose eyes shone in starlight. Science calls that folklore. Folklore often remembers what history forgets. Theory 2, a lost human civilization. Some argued the opposite, that this wasn't alien at all, that humanity in some forgotten age rose high, fell hard, and left only fragments, strange bones, impossible discs, and tech mistaken for magic. A cycle as old as time, rise, flourish, destruction, and then amnesia. As one archaeologist wrote privately, history repeats, memory erodes, civilizations drown in its own dust. Maybe the Dropa Stones weren't aliens, maybe they were us, from before we knew ourselves. Hikers explored and quiet locals told stories that scholars ignored. Compasses spinning suddenly in the humming mountains. Devices losing signal only in certain valleys. A deep hum at sunset, steady and rhythmic. Dreams vivid and strange after sleeping near caves. Not frightening, just aware, as if something beneath the rocks still listened. Some described it as standing near a massive engine, not loud but present. Atmospheric anomaly, geothermal resonance, or something else, something buried, still powered, and still watching. Those who have claimed to have heard the disc speak describe not words, but intent, a pulse, a yearning, a sadness older than memory. One independent radio researcher who attempted to recreate the spiral pattern on quartz plates claimed to intercept faint tones at the same frequency range, 7.3 Hz, the frequency associated with deep human consciousness. He stopped after waking one night convinced he heard whispers. His final handwritten note said only, "It knows." The research community mocked him, then quietly stopped asking questions. If it was a hoax, why fear it? If the Dropa Stones were nothing, a fabrication, a misinterpretation, why erase records? Why confiscate samples? Why silence scholars? Why block mountains? Why classify the files? Hoaxes are debunked, not buried. Artifacts without meaning are ignored, not sealed away. Yet every time the Dropa story resurfaces, someone pushes it back into shadow. Truth does not fear the light, secrets do. And somewhere beneath the stone older than recorded time, something still whispers through crystal. Not dead, not forgotten, but waiting. The Dropa Stones could have been a footnote, a curiosity tucked into dusty shelves and forgotten by time. That isn't what happened. Instead, what followed was a pattern seen too often when discoveries threatened the accepted order of things. Interest, alarm, and then silence. Not public silence, institutional silence. Records erased, access denied, names removed, maps redacted, questions answered with tighter doors and sharper eyes. One morning, the professor, already shaken from an academic exile, He returned quietly to the storage room, hoping to find at least one disc untouched, but he found empty shelves. The crates were gone, the catalog cards removed, the storage ledger altered. The entry numbers jumped, as if an entire row had never existed. When he asked the staff, they shrugged uncomfortably. No record of those items, they said. Perhaps a mislabeling. Artifacts sometimes get reassigned. And he noticed something chilling in their eyes, not confusion, but fear. Someone higher had given instructions. Later in private, a colleague whispered to him, "They came and took them, don't ask." Who they were was never clarified, but universities don't send unknown men to seize dusty stones. Governments do, or someone operating beyond government lines. Soon after, expedition reports vanished from archives, field notes removed, names of the original explorers from missing personnel lists. Even local village elders who once spoke of sky people suddenly refused to discuss the caves. When pressed, they shook their heads. Forget it, there's nothing there. Caves cursed, soldiers came. Somewhere along the line, the mountains gained restriction zone patrols, officially for environmental monitoring. Unofficially, checkpoint logs show foreign academics turned away, permits denied, equipment confiscated. A journalist who attempted to reach the valley in the 1980s was intercepted, where film, notes, and audio tapes were taken. She later admitted, "They didn't threaten me. They didn't have to. They looked at me like I'd glimpsed something I shouldn't." Then came a strange period, files dripping into public space like water from a cracked pipe. A Soviet researcher hinted at seismic anomalies in the mountains, rhythmic pulses, not geological. A European academic received an anonymous package, a fragment of stone with micro grooves and cobalt traces. He tested it. It responded to ultraviolet light with a faint inner glow. Some weeks later, men in gray suits retrieved it. They thanked him politely. He never saw it again. His quiet letter to a friend was the last time he mentioned the fragment. It wasn't ancient art. It was machined memory. Around this same time, the opposite began. A full-spectrum counter-campaign. Fake photos. Contradictory reports. Conflicting debunkings. Stories seeded in tabloids to discredit the subject. A known pattern. If you can't erase truth, bury it under noise. Soon no one could tell what was real, and that was the point. While the world argued over fake images, the real discs were already gone. Decades passed. Occasionally, a retired official would slip, mentioning electrical anomalies or non-traditional materials, or the phrase memory stones, always followed by an uneasy silence. One even muttered as he walked away, "Some things are older than governments, and perhaps older than human civilization as we recognize it. But why hide it? The most inconvenient discoveries are not those that rewrite a page, but those that rewrite the first line. If the Dropa Stones were proof of ancient travelers, or evidence of forgotten human advancements, or records of mines encoded into mineral, or warning beacons from a doomed civilization, then history itself is fragile. Empires are built on origin stories. Institutions are built on certainty. Worldviews are built on the comfort of knowing we were first, we were alone, and we were in control. What happens if a thin disk says otherwise? Some truths don't get buried because they're false. They get buried because they're dangerous. Time has a way of softening legends, but not this one. The Dropa Stones didn't fade into myth because people forgot them. They faded because someone kept trying to erase them. And yet, like stubborn embers under ash, the story kept growing. Not through official channels, through whispers, through half-lost notes, through stolen photographs, smuggled fragments, and memories that refused to obey silence. This is what remains today. Across the world in private basements, locked drawers, and encrypted folders, there are pieces. Tiny slivers of truth almost stolen. A blurred microfilm of a cave filled with small skeletons. A photocopied page showing spiral grooves measured in micron-scale precision. A researcher's log describing low-frequency vibrations during testing. a smuggled photograph of a disc under laboratory light, with the spirals glowing faintly. These aren't museum artifacts, they're relics in exile, protected not by institutions but by those who refuse to forget. Quiet academics, the kind who speak off the record, share strange details in late-night calls and private conferences. Quartz metal hybrid compounds unknown in archaeology, frequency behavior similar to modern data crystals, electrical signatures responding to ultraviolet light, magnetic anomalies around the mountain valley, rumors of a sealed underground chamber shaped like a vault. Not proven, not disproven, just held back like a breath. A retired geologist once told a colleague, "The mountain hums, and rock shouldn't hum." Those who reach the foothills, few now, since access restrictions, return with stories. Compasses twitching without wind, phones losing signal in clean skies, low vibration in the ears like distant engines, dreams vivid and strange after only one night in the slopes. Locals no longer tell the old stories openly, but behind closed doors, elders still murmur. The sky people slept in stone. Their tears are in the mountain. They wait for the light to take them. Ancient poetry? Maybe. Memory disguised as myth? Maybe. Or history spoken the only way a village without books can speak it, through story. And then there is the great irony. Today our scientists etch data into quartz. They store memory in crystal lattices. They encode sound not as ink, but as frequency. We call it next generation storage. Yet a century ago, explorers found discs in a cave, stone mixed with metal, cut in spirals, vibrating when stimulated, and we said impossible. Sometimes the future looks like the past because the past got there first. Perhaps the Dropa Stones are the memory archive of travelers who never went home, a warning carved into eternity, evidence of a forgotten human age, or proof that our planet has hosted more than one kind of intelligence. But even if no definitive proof surfaces tomorrow, the effect already occurred. The story broke the frame. It cracked the neat shape of history just enough for light to leak in. Because the stones, real or erased, do not simply ask what happened long ago. They ask, what else do we not know? And who decides what we are allowed to remember? Some believe the stones still exist, locked in vaults, research labs, or hidden beneath the reinforced earth. Others believe they remain where they were first found, silent guardians in the mountains, waiting for someone who cannot hear with ears but with attention. And perhaps on certain nights when the wind crosses the stone just right, there's still a vibration, a hum that feels alive, aware, grieving, and hopeful. Truth does not vanish because someone orders it gone. Truth waits. High in those remote peaks, the wind still cuts across the ancient stone. The caves sit in silence, their stories sealed in strata and secrecy. Bones crumble and dust settles, but memory, real memory, survives where belief dares to look. Maybe the Dropa were never meant to be discovered when they were. Maybe they knew the time would bury them. Maybe they made their records not for their era, but for ours. And maybe one day someone will hold the final remaining disc to the light, and the grooves will hum softly, and a voice, lonely across millennia, will speak again. Until then, the question lingers like a whisper in the stone. What if we are not the first ones to dream under the sky? This has been Sleeping with History, where the past truly never rests, and neither do we.